The man was just urinating by the side of the road, when suddenly a stone in the distance caught his eye. He wiped away the sand on the surface, and discovered that it was actually a piece of gold. He wanted to keep it for himself, but when he saw his companion looking at him, he called the bearded man over. They immediately pulled out a lighter and held the flame to the stone, but it didn't change color, so it seemed to be real gold. Excited, the two men immediately grabbed their tools and started digging. Unexpectedly, the gold was larger than they had imagined. Even with two strong men trying to move it, it didn't budge. Then they continued digging downward, and discovered that this was not just a piece of gold, but a gold mine. They dug until nightfall, and still couldn't see the bottom. The thought of never having to work again for the rest of their lives made the two of them excitedly shout and scream. In order to live a wealthy life as soon as possible, the bearded man suggested that Mike drive to the city to find an excavator to help. He would stay behind to guard the gold, since it would take at least 5 days round trip. He was confident in his wilderness survival skills, but Mike insisted that the gold was his discovery, and insisted on guarding it himself. The bearded man didn't say anything, but the next day, he took most of the water with him, claiming it was needed to cool the engine, leaving only a small amount for Mike, and instructed him to hold on. In 5 days, they'd be rich. After the bearded man left, Mike reburied the gold, then set up a makeshift tent beside a dead tree, safely getting through the first day. But due to the large temperature difference between day and night in the desert, so the next day he decided to go further afield to find more dry branches. He accidentally discovered the wreckage of an airplane. This was an excellent shelter, both blocking the scorching sun and the sandstorms. The only downside was that he couldn't see the gold he had buried from here, so Mike dismantled the plane into pieces, dragged the parts back to the gold, and set up a makeshift tent. Through the window, he could just see the gold in the distance. Reassured, he quickly fell asleep, but he didn't expect that the desert sun was so harsh that it burned his forehead with blisters through the cracks. Worried that he might die there, he used a rock to knock down a large piece of gold, and was preparing to leave when the bearded man called. He told Mike he had found the excavator, and was on his way back. This also dispelled Mike's desire to leave, so he stayed put and endured for another 2 days. He had already eaten all the food, and there was only 1 bottle of water left. His sunburn was getting worse, but the bearded man showed no signs of returning. At that moment, Mike noticed a car approaching in the distance. He wanted to go ask for help, but he was afraid of losing the gold in front of him. After a mental struggle, he could only watch helplessly as the car drove away. Finally, on the 5th day, the bearded man still hadn't shown up. Mike called him and asked where he was, but all he got was a vague response that he'd be there soon. At that point, the weakened Mike was surrounded by wild dogs, and his life was in danger at any moment. However, what he didn't know was that the bearded man had arrived here 2 days earlier. He held a telescope, and quietly watched as Mike was attacked by wild dogs. It wasn't until that moment that Mike realized he had been deceived by the bearded man. Even as he lay dying, he still thought about the gold. Watching Mike being eaten by the wild dogs, the bearded man laughed happily. Now all the gold was his, but just as he was about to dig up the gold, an arrow shattered all his illusions.